So we will now transition to the open session on the European Universities Alliances, and I'm very pleased to invite Donoghue, who is Executive Board Member, who will moderate this session. I'll maybe, to not lose more time, maybe already invite also the panelists to join us on the stage. So Vanessa Debiais-Sainton from the European Commission, Lenka Rovná from Charles University, Dorothy Kelly from the University of Granada, and Raúl Ramos from the University of Barcelona. Thank you.
First of all, I want to thank all of the panelists for agreeing to contribute to this session. We've had sessions before on university alliances. This one we hope will be a little bit different because we want to engage as much discussion as possible. One of the earlier speakers said, we really want you to be not the quiet, shy students, but we really want you to engage in the process. That's really important. So this is a great opportunity to really discuss some of what we're calling opportunities and challenges within aspects of global engagement within the alliances. So just to give you a sense of what we want to do in this session, I'm just going to say a few words really on behalf of my colleagues within the Coimbra group in terms of some of the position we see within this topic of alliances becoming global actors. We're then delighted that Vanessa Debiais-Sainton from the Higher Education Unit within the European Commission will then say some words, which I think is really important in terms of setting the scene from the Commission's perspective. And then we've got 3 examples of alliances. And what we're really wanting to think about is not necessarily these as perfect examples or anything like that. That's not the point. The point is an opportunity to really talk about opportunities and challenges. So we'll ask our contributors to be relatively brief so that we get as much time as possible for discussion from the audience. So you're very much part of this session. If I could have the next slide, please. Okay, so this is just a very, very quick summary from my perspective because it's a little bit of a timeline here, and we've got to think about the context of what was proposed originally. And I'm not going to, if you like, try and speak for Vanessa at all here. So the first couple of bullet points here are just giving a sense of this has been a very rapid process from 2018 through to the launch phase in 2019, and then just to remind us all of the success, if you like, in terms of engagement of Coimbra Group members, with now 36 of our 40 members now part of alliances and very much engaged in thinking about some of the, if you like, the levers of Erasmus Plus funding, external action instruments, aspects of Horizon Europe. So these are all things that hopefully will come up in the discussions later on about how the alliances actually have resources to actually build on this globalization question. So what we really trying to also think about from the Coimbra group is the kind of things we all do, if you like, all 40 members, in terms of disseminating good practice through our working groups and through our high-level policy seminars. And we've had a number of seminars which are directly relevant to the question today. Internationalization in the curriculum, multilingualism, the United Nations high-level seminar we had in terms of thinking of NGOs and engagement there, interdisciplinary research, learning spaces, research impact. All of those things are directly relevant to the questions today. So the purpose of the discussion then is to think about those opportunities and challenges in a bit of depth and get a dialogue on this question, and also to think about how the wider aspects of the Coimbra group as a network can actually help to help those alliances meet those challenges. If I could have the next slide, please. Now, just before the alliances ever came into being, one of the things the Coimbra group did, and I had the sort of pleasure of trying to coordinate this, was we undertook a benchmarking exercise looking at just what global education looked like. And we did a survey, and actually I remember we talked about the launch of that in Salamanca, and I think Vanessa was with us at that session. So we're sort of coming full circle now, having done this survey of nearly 17,000 students, both international and domestic, and nearly 8,000 of our staff. And it was one of the first surveys that looked at both staff and students. And this is an absolutely crucial point. A lot of the surveys that you see on measuring and benchmarking internationalization are very much student-led. And so this is a little bit different. If I could have the next slide, please. So just for me to sort of finish my part, this is a very quick summary of the results of the whole survey. If you can put that on one slide, it's pretty difficult. But what the survey was doing was asking our members, by, if you like, sending out a really well thought out questionnaire and asking them what the importance of one of what we call the pillars of internationalization. And that the 5 things we were looking at were social integration, academic integration, communication skills, language skills, and global opportunities and skills. And all of those are absolutely crucial to the way in which alliances have to think about ways of actually working with each other and actually working beyond the alliance as well. And if you can imagine that graph shows an x equals y line, and you can see the green, hopefully you can see the green dots. And what they're showing is that the green dots on the global opportunities and skills for our undergraduate students, for our bachelor students, are actually the furthest away from the x equals y line, the point at which the importance and the delivery are actually matching each other. So that means there's a lot of work to do before we even start. And what's also interesting is that as we move to postgraduate students, the situation gets better. You actually get closer up that line. So we're starting from a point of challenge. And I think the interesting thing about the alliances is that they've got some really interesting examples about how you meet some of those challenges and how you think about those. So just to say that one of the things that we think we might be able to do in the future, once alliances are properly embedded, is rerun a survey like this to be able to sort of start to measure what the impact of some of those opportunities might be. So I'm going to stop there. Just that's my introduction. If you could go on to the next slide. And just say some thoughts about the kind of things we might want to discuss later on in terms of, these are just a few ideas thrown out. We've got to think about what the challenges are about being a global actor in the session. Is it about student welfare? Is it about learning gain, employability, graduate skills, global citizenship? Just a few ideas to get us thinking in terms of the way our presentation might work. Okay, so now that's the end of my part. So if we go on to the next slide, please. Oh, this is where the gremlins come in. So the next presentation, please, yes. Sorry, I thought they were joined together. And when the next one comes in, then I'll know who to introduce. So there's almost an element of uncertainty in the process here. Oh, sorry, I should have said, my apologies. The schedule now is that I would actually like to invite Vanessa, now to give her perspective of the European Commission, and then we will move on to the examples from the alliances. So Vanessa, you can either stay seated or you can come to the lectern. It's up to you.
Okay, no, I think I can stay here. Maybe I will try. Well, we had fantastic presentations. I would like to congratulate the 3 ladies before. It's very difficult to come next after such fantastic presentation. So I don't claim, and I don't want to even try to compete with them, but I'll try to introduce the point. So I would like to come back to the source of why we created these European Universities Alliances. What was the objective of the head of governments and head of states when they decided about this brilliant idea of creating such European Universities Alliances? There were two main objectives. The first one was to create competitive and attractive global actors in the world scene. They were quite frustrated when looking at the rankings, and we all know the flaws in the global rankings, but nevertheless, especially when it comes to global interaction, we know that your global partners are looking at them. So basically, the idea was to really create alliances where universities could combine their strengths on all their missions, education, research, and innovation, to be able to compete with the most well-known global actors in the world. And we have learned, and I'm sure Lenka, Dorothy, and Raúl will explain it afterwards better than me, that they are much more than the sum of their universities. So can you imagine the potential? Now, of course, to make this utopia a reality, we ask them, and it's really, really important for them to now bring what they have tested in the first 3 years into a mainstreaming in all the activities of their members of the universities. It's highly ambitious. So all these good practices in terms of developing joint activities, joint programs, joint micro-credentials, joint modules, joint knowledge teams, joint knowledge valorization, all this actually needs to penetrate all the different parts of the universities, of their faculties, so that all the projects and all activities ongoing each members, each universities, goes in the same direction of the common strategy of the alliance. So aligning institutional strategies with the global strategy of their alliances, which can be, on top of what you just presented, also tackling global challenges, climate change, digitalization of our society, artificial intelligence, but also global citizens, as you said, global health. You mentioned global COVID-19, how to address mental health. So challenges are numerous. And we have the best universities in Europe and the best creative minds. We have seen it before. So let's use all this potential and bring it to the next level by collaborating in a much deeper way than before. So you will have understood that by really cooperating deeply, we can achieve wonders. So that was the first objective. The second objective was also to develop a strong European identity, a strong sense of belonging, of what is the added value of being a European. It's really being united in this diversity, being more creative, being more innovative, all together, because our culture is so rich, our ways of looking at things are so different that it can make a difference. And this is what Europe this is what makes Europe unique in the world. It's this diversity of culture. And so far, we have undermined the potential. We have not used to the full that potential. And this is what we are aiming at with these European universities, is to really build on that strong potential to make us the global leaders of tomorrow. And by working together, the universities in developing joint programs that can lead to a joint European degree label, and one day we hope to a joint European degree, this will show every student, every young people, what it means to be European. It means to be able to study and to work anywhere in Europe, have the potential to come here today from all Europe in Köln, and to exchange together, and to build knowledge together, and to exchange, and to address, for example, the fantastic issues that the three doctoral candidates addressed before. But it goes even beyond that, looking from an international perspective. It also means sharing values, academic freedom, academic values, also with the partners outside Europe. So where we are with that, we do not want to impose anything to the universities. They know which partners are best to cooperate with to address these global challenges that I mentioned before. We see some alliances as part of their global strategy, having highlighted Africa, and I've seen Africa at the entrance of the university in Köln here, which is very important partner. Others have, as I would say, as part of their strategy, Latin America, because of their history, because of their culture, especially those from Southern Europe, have a strong historical bonds with Latin America. Others with other parts of the world. Of course, from a European perspective, we also have priorities. For example, Ukraine. How can we help Ukrainian partners to reshape their higher education system? And they are really in demand of getting inspired by all of your universities. So that's why we were so happy to see so many European universities alliances proposing to associate Ukrainian universities to their alliances, and we have seen in the last Erasmus Plus call open for the European Universities Alliances a lot of proposals for associations, so we are quite hopeful that with the results that we will present before the summer, this cooperation is going to really become a reality. And we are supporting this strong cooperation with Ukraine with additional sources of funding from Erasmus+, where helping Ukraine is of course a top priority. Integrating Western Balkan is another priority for the Commission. And that is why now in the last Erasmus+ call they can participate as full partners. So we are also very optimistic to see with the results before the summer good progress in that front. So to build and to foster this cooperation with all those parts of the world, there are external cooperation instruments, European external instruments that are available to universities. One is Erasmus Mundus, that can be useful to develop common joint master programs. Another one is the capacity building action to build capacity in these countries. And also, of course, the mobility, student and staff mobility. So there are the possibility to apply for these mobilities through the external instruments, but also, since the new Erasmus Plus program, now you can use the normal Erasmus Plus funding for mobility to also give that opportunity to your students, to your staff, to develop future-looking skills abroad in your partner countries. So if you use all these opportunities, having in mind the global objective and global strategy of your alliance, that can really help shaping a better world. But I'm sure Raúl, Dorothy and Lenka will explain that better than me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vanessa. Lots to follow up on that. That's a fantastic overview. So if I could ask, Lenka, are you speaking for EU+? And do you want to use the lectern, or are you happy just?
Yeah, and the new slides will be managed by Johannes, yeah?
Okay, that's perfect.
So
Lenka.
I think I can stay here. So, dear friends, dear colleagues, this is a pleasure to be here. It's also difficult to come after 3 students and Vanessa, but I hope that I manage. To manage, I brought a help and assistance, and Olivier, whom you know from Geneva University, to help with the presentation. So I am very happy to present here our 4U Plus Alliance. which is composed by 7 partners, as you see. So the founding members are 4. This means Sorbonne and Heidelberg universities and Charles and Warsaw universities, and then we needed some north and southern partners, so Copenhagen, Milano joined, and we are now very happy to have Geneva on board, and we expect a new edition in July. What I think is extremely important that we are at present 7 partners, but there is one vision, and this is to build one comprehensive research European university. So, thank you. First of all, when we were preparing ourselves for the presentation, we thought what is priority for us, because we are not project-driven, but we are mission-driven. So, and this means institution building and, of course, then our activities. So, we concentrate on formation of the framework for internationalization. We are having a legal entity according to German law based in Heidelberg, but considering to move partially or completely to Brussels. And institutions we are constructing are constructed for the alliance, for the legal entity. Then there are projects which help us to fulfill the mission. And then we have project management. So this is the formation of the basis for international cooperation. Next slide, please. We are also in the process of the preparation of new mission statement. Within 4U+, there are different groupings which are debating different parts, and internationalization is one of them. So what I said, these are institutions prepared for that. Then, with the addition of Geneva University, we added a new field, and this is the field of international organizations. Olivier will then comment on that later. In all our plans, projects, we are considering internationalization of education, research, because whenever there is a student who enters, one international student entering one of our universities or researcher, automatically he can cooperate with all member universities in 4U+. Also, in new project we applied for the question of internationalization is present. Then, if I can ask for a new slide. Vanessa mentioned cooperation with Ukraine. So I was thinking what are current specifics of 4U+, and this is most of all our openness towards Ukraine, but also countries of Eastern partnerships. It was last fall, under the Czech presidency at the Council of the EU, when the agreement was signed between 4EU+ universities, some of them, but all other cooperate as well, with Taras Shevchenko University in Kiev, then Uzhhorod University, Ivan Franko National University in Lviv, and Olej Hončar Dnipro National University. And there were also 2 additional universities in Tbilisi, Georgia, and Moldova State University. Under the auspices of 4EU+ universities, also the governments, ministries of foreign affairs, we are offering cooperation in different fields. In education, offering courses, joint research projects, but also the role in society. So next slide, please. So I, in fact, said what are the main pillars: the scientific cooperation, education, best practices. It's also wonderful that we can help to share best practice and prepare the staff of universities and also role in society. So next one, please. And so this is for Olivier.
Yes, thank you. Geneva speaking now. So Geneva, 42 international organizations, 179 permanent missions, and many, many NGOs. This is a unique environment, of course, for a university. It's a gold mine, to take an expression that was used yesterday. It's a real gold mine. Why? Because we can be at the science policy interface. For 4U+, the service to society is a very important component of our action. And in Geneva, we can be at this interface and develop synergies between academia and the Geneva ecosystem. We can also train young researchers on developing skills to be good communicators and to be able to translate their research into policies, and then learn also from the political world and international organizations. An example, again, on Ukraine, UNECE is the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe, and it's been mandated to coordinate the UN action for the reconstruction of Ukraine. So 2 months ago, we had a meeting with them in Geneva and with the management committee and the flagship coordinators, the academics of 4U+, to see how we can coordinate our program on Ukraine with the efforts of the United Nations system for the reconstruction. So we hope it will bear some fruits, but the future will tell us. Thank you.
Thank you. So next, please. So there is another program for Ukraine, and if the first one was initiated and coordinated by Charles University, this one is coordinated by Warsaw University, and this is for EU+ for Ukraine with very similar targets, and this is paid by Solidarity with Ukraine program. So if to sum up, if we look at that, so currently 4EU+ is concentrated on the finalization of preparation of the framework for internationalization. Second, our current priorities are countries of Eastern Partnership and international organizations. And third, 4EU+ is now mobilized by working on a new mission statement for the years 2025 till 2035, and one of the priorities is going to be internationalization. And the last point, that cooperation with one of our universities means automatically cooperation with all 7 member universities. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much for EU+, both of you, Lenka and Vanessa. Can we have the next presentation up, please? And I think that will be Dorothy Kelly from Arqus.
Let's see. If we we have the presentation? Great, thank you. We can move on, Johannes, to the next slide. Thank you very much. This gets harder and harder because it's after our three brilliant 3-minute thesis speakers, and then after Danny, Vanessa, Lenka and Olivier, it really is getting harder and harder. But I will try to explain as briefly as possible the Arqus approach to the global dimension of the European Universities initiative. Just a very quick reminder of the composition of the Arqus Alliance. You will recognize some Coimbra Group universities in there, Granada, Padova, Graz and Vilnius, but also as original members Leipzig and Lyon, and now in our second phase, Minho, Wrocław and Maynooth. And very importantly for us, and here picking up also on the example from 4EU+, we also have an associate partner, the National University of Kiev Mohila Academy in the Ukraine. The Coimbra Group is also, of course, an associate partner, and I would like to take advantage of the opportunity to thank the Coimbra Group for this series of opportunities over the years for the alliances to exchange. I think it is extremely important for the alliances to share our experience, and I think that within the Coimbra Group, the role of the Coimbra Group in promoting that exchange of experiences, best practices and challenges, I think has been extremely important. I think we can move on. This is just a very general presentation. Lenka mentioned the mission statement and the vision of 4EU+, and I would just like to comment very briefly. You can click again, Johannes, that in our renewed mission statement for the period 22 to 23, the global dimension of the alliance has been very, very present. One of our points in the mission is acting as a committed multi-level society and global player. I think it's very, very important to underline that. And in our values, the core European values, and I think this is important also, universities as the lighthouse of European values, as the European strategy states, in the pursuit of peace and justice, not only in Europe, but throughout the world. And if we move forward to the next slide, amongst our major goals, I'm moving on as fast as I can here, we have a particular point on enhanced intercultural competence, global understanding, and respect for diversity throughout our communities. If we move on just very, very briefly here, I want to look at the left of this slide rather than the rest of the slide, because there's not time to go into detail. But on the left of the slide, we have the 3 priority areas which our 9 universities have identified as areas where we already have existing cooperation and where we feel we should intensify our cooperation in all university missions. And you will see that the 3 areas are very interdisciplinary, very transdisciplinary, and affect both education and research, but also societal engagement. So artificial intelligence and digital transformation, climate change and the Green Deal, and European heritage and identity, all of which are global. Even European heritage and identity is global, because identity only makes sense when it is situated in the context of the other. So clearly, European identity depends, to a great extent, on non-European identity also. So if we move on, I have attempted in the next slide just to pick up, to pick up on some of the elements of the global dimension in what we've been doing so far and in our plans for the future. And here, I'd like to come back a little bit to Danny's introduction, because our approach to the global dimension is not an international relations approach, but rather an internationalization approach. So the idea being that the global permeates everything that we do, internationalization at home, as well as having global partners. The 3 major challenges, as I said, to which we are devoting much of our effort in our joint educational offer, in promoting our joint research dimension, and in our societal engagement are all global in nature. We cannot talk about, as I said, artificial intelligence, we cannot talk about climate change in a local fashion without looking at the global dimension. So that is the first thing. The second is our transversal emphasis on intercultural competence and global understanding. And just as an example here, in the joint educational offer which we are developing, I have taken the example here of the 3 joint master's programs which we have set up. But of course, this is also the case for micro-credentials for summer schools and for staff development programs that we are undertaking. You will see that all 3 are global in the content of what we are addressing. So European studies, but understood as Europe as a global actor. International cybersecurity, pretty obviously global in its nature, and translating and interpreting, which, as many of you know, is very, very dear to my own heart, but has always been global in its approach. Another, I think, perhaps more singular approach to the global dimension is our new Arqus Talent Fund, which is a scholarship program using third-party funding from the Erasmus Plus funding, and it's a scholarship program for global candidates to undertake, at the moment, doctoral studies at Arqus universities, at least 2 Arqus universities, promoting co-tutelle, promoting joint doctoral research. And then our International Advisory Board. Right from day 1, the Alliance has counted on an external advisory board, which is global in nature, as it has members from Africa, from North America, and from South America. And that, to us, is a very, very important insight into how we are seen from outside Europe. And I think, again, that global dimension is important. And we have imported this view from outside Europe into the pilot project, the experimentation on the European degree label, where we will be working, we're working with 3 other alliances in this pilot project, and we are working with networks from beyond Europe in order to analyze with them just how attractive European degrees and the European degree label will be globally. Some empirical evidence there, which I think has been missing in the debate to date. So we're working there with Unimed. Many of you will be familiar with Unimed, and in fact, Raúl and I had this conversation with Unimed just a couple of months ago in a very similar panel. CASA is a consortium of North American universities, which also has Trinity, so a Coimbra group link there as a member, and the Grupo Montevideo, again, an associate of the Coimbra group, so very important in Latin America. And finally, as many, many other alliances are doing, we are slowly identifying key strategic partners beyond Europe. We're looking in some detail at the complementarity of existing global partnerships and networks within our 9 universities. And we are hoping, I think this is important, to pay special attention also in this search for our global partners to Latin America, particularly in the light of the EU-LAC upcoming summit after quite some years of very little bi-regional contact, or a lot less than we think is desirable. So we're hoping there to give an important role to Latin America in our global dimension. What tools do we use to do this? Well, of course, we use K131, we use K171. We will think about using capacity building. We're using the third-party funding that we are able to use. I think we need new tools. And I look to Vanessa, she knows we need new tools. Because the current structure of funding makes things complicated. It's not just funding, actually. And I'm thinking, and I have always thought since 171 was set up, that it would be fantastic to be able to have not just national consortia for 131 and 171, but to have European consortia. And I think that would be a very, very important way of consolidating the global dimension of the alliances for the future. A centralized action which would allow non-national consortia for funding. We're also using, and this is very similar to 4EU+, national funds for our external dimension, in particular with Ukraine. Having Wrocław on board for us has also allowed us to use NAWA funding. We have Arqus for Ukraine, and we're able to work not only with the Mohila Academy, but with other Ukrainian partners through that funding. And again, I think that is pointing to a path forward. That is the combination of European and national funding. And I think I will leave it there. There are a couple more slides, but they're not necessary. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Dorothy. Lots to follow up on there. If we could have the last presentation for Raúl, please, on the screen. Are you going to sit there, or do you want to use the lectern?
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
So I will come here. Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you very much for the invitation to be here. Thank you also to all the previous speakers for their inspiring interventions. Being the last, of course, has some advantages and has some difficulties, because it will be difficult to avoid some repetition to what has been already said. But anyway, it's always good to have this slot to try to explain what we are doing in the Charmio Alliance. Next, please. So the idea is that our alliance is formed by 9 universities. We have 51 associate partners, and we have around 269,000 students. So this is just to make you an idea of the type of universities that are behind this alliance. Most of you are already here, so I hope that you feel represented from what I will be explaining. Let me just select from this slide the last point. We were one of the first alliances to create the first joint master degree program under the criteria of this initiative, and this has also been explained somehow by Dorothy in the framework of the alliance. Next, please. So from a point of view of the type of universities that we are cooperating behind this project or this alliance initiative, you can see that we are covering geographically most of the European territory. But of course here today we are not to talk about this dimension, but to talk about the global. So next, please. So the idea is that one of our objectives is precisely to become a global actor, and what we understand by that is that we want to foster the transferability of what we are doing. I think that if there is something that characterizes all the work that our alliances are doing, is that we try to innovate, we try to learn, we try to experiment, and this is the main added value from this initiative from our perspective. But this innovation cannot become only within the members of the alliances. We have to transfer. And the idea is that we want to transfer it not only across Europe, but also from a global perspective. So that's why this external cooperation and partnership at all levels is also relevant for us. And it's important at all levels, because today we are going to talk about this global dimension, but of course for us it's also very important to keep the contact with those stakeholders that are close to us. I will come back to that at the end of my presentation. There are some values that we all share. We also have our mission, our values that have been commonly agreed by all members of the Alliance. But I would like just to remark this idea that excellence, inclusion, diversity, and democratic values are central to us, and that we want a long-term commitment and a long-term cooperation in this multicultural environment as the way we understand this initiative. Let me mention that from that perspective, we are all facing the same global challenges. So we all know, are committed to achievement of the 2030 Agenda, to Sustainable Development Goals, and this is what is driving our approach, both from the point of view of, let's say, the teaching dimension and also the research dimension. Next, please. So just a couple of slides to illustrate how we see the cooperation with our academic partners, and then with also external stakeholders. So from the point of view of academic partnerships, during these 3 years, I think that we have been very aware about how much eyes are looking at what we are doing. I think that this implies that we have a very high responsibility in order to be able to transfer what we are doing. And we started by creating the Charmio Toolkit. You can check it in our website. We will see that everything that has been discussed among our members in terms of the governance model, in terms of teaching innovations, but also in terms of our research strategy, is available under this website. There are some documents that, of course, are confidential within the network, but in case you want to learn a bit more about what we are doing there, we are always very happy to attend these bilateral meetings and try to explain what is behind this different approach. So our main objective now is to reinforce our strategic partnerships, not only with individual universities, but also with the networks where we are part of it. As Dorothy has mentioned, the Coimbra Group Initiatives is remarkable in this perspective. We had the chance to have a similar slot in Padova last year, and it was good. We are always trying to cooperate with other institutions like EUA, but also with UNIMED, as Dorothy mentioned. And for example, the kind of initiative that the Coimbra Group did some months ago with the Grupo Montevideo was a good example of the kind of partnerships that we want to pursue in this new period. We want to become global actors in the sense that we use our current networks in order to expand what we are doing. And here, there is a lot of work that can be done. Let me also mention the high level of coordination that we have among alliances. We have different fora where we usually meet and exchange. Let me just highlight the excellent job done by the coordinators of the 4U1 and 4U2 groups, and also into these pilot initiatives that also Dorothy was mentioning before, of the legal entity and the label degree. We are part of it, and it has been surprising how fast we managed to agree with different alliances and consortiums in order to work together and not to compete among us for let's say, the reduced funding that was available for this pilot initiative. Okay, but everything was fine. But I mean, there are not only opportunities, there are also some challenges, some barriers that we have to be aware of that. I mean, we cannot forget that our position as a global actor is under scrutiny, and we have to be very careful to the kind of engagement that we have with academic partners. We have to be aware that there are some position papers on how to tackle with R&I foreign interference. This is also very relevant in several of our initiatives. And we cannot forget that the role of universities in the international landscape is also changing nowadays. And again, the recent experience in the Coimbra Group with the extraordinary General Assembly that we had a couple of weeks ago is an example of the kind of situations where this idea that universities can be agents in this world of soft diplomacy without compromising the university autonomy and our academic freedom is difficult to achieve. And so here is an issue that perhaps we can discuss after my presentation if we have time. Next, please. But I think that the most relevant challenge that we have under this initiative is to have our stakeholders engaged into the project. Our experience in our SWAPS project called Torch has been quite remarkable in some aspects, but one where we have found more difficulties is precisely when we try to implement what, this idea of citizen science, co-creation strategies, because it requires a lot of effort, it requires a lot of time, it requires a lot of resources, not only economic, but also in terms of time, and it requires a continuous adjustment of the expectations from both sides. Okay? It's very important that when we identify those stakeholders that we want to work on, that we try to make an analysis of their needs, and this is something that sometimes we are not fully aware of that. It's very important from our experience in terms of the customs of our masters, but also the co-tutels that we have established for PhD programs, and a very specific challenge for the future, which is continuous education and the capacity that European universities can have also to increase the overall competitiveness of our manufacturing and services sectors, and also, of course, agriculture, is related precisely on how we are able to introduce into the system innovative actions that can help our workforce to become always, let's say, on the top, on the frontier of knowledge in their specific field. This is something that, as we imagine in CharmU, has to become from a dynamic portfolio based on these needs and based on a bottom-up approach. Okay, let me also just mention to finalize a couple of initiatives that we are also working on it. Our CharmU Alumni Network, where our community can act as ambassadors of all these initiatives and to become relevant agents in this landscape. The Global Hybrid Classroom, that comes directly from the experience that we have in the Master. And also we are considering the possibility of introducing new programs of scholarships specifically addressed to the Global South. But as far as we are now, as individual universities, evaluating the applications of the Coimbra Group grant scheme, perhaps what would be good is that we try to cooperate into that. I think that it would be a good opportunity also to establish these links. So let me finalize with one last sentence. I think that the challenges that we are facing as European universities are exactly the same that individual ones, but we have much more responsibility. We have, there is an obligation for us to be able to find the capacity to become this relevant actor, as Vanessa was saying, in order to change the dynamics that we had in the past. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you to all our panelists for those excellent presentations. And I'd like to sort of start off with one very obvious reflection, and that is that when we've heard presentations about alliances before, a lot of the emphasis has been about education. And I started talking about education, and Vanessa, of course, reminded us very quickly that actually when we think about alliances, we want to think about how they affect, if you like, the global reputation. And the only way to do that is to think about research. And all of you have talked about the importance of research. And I think this is one of the challenges. Dorothy immediately raised the question of instruments. How do we actually do that? And so maybe that's one thing we definitely want to spend a little bit of time on in our discussions. So what I'd like to do is take some questions. So I'm going to take maybe 3 questions and then allow the panel to respond. And then if we've got time, maybe another 3 questions. So please, if we could have some hands up, please, for questions from the audience. So we've got 1, 2, third one? 3, right, excellent. Okay, so start, Beatrice. We will need an extra microphone, sorry. Yeah. If you could just...
Thank you very much to all of you, and thank you, Vanessa, again for coming here and for just being always present and being ready to answer questions and to listen to what we are doing. Now, I've got one question that also relates to what you said at the beginning. So for the European University for Wellbeing, UniWell, we just had President Zelensky for a, in this auditorium, we could see him on the screen because Taras Shevchenko National University of Kiev is our full partner. And I say here full partner because we, in this global perspective, differentiate between the Erasmus Plus project and everything where we can get money from. So now I'm of course exaggerating, but the alliance as a whole. And so he then also mentioned, of course, Europe is very crucial for Ukraine, and not just, of course, to help finish this atrocious war, but also for the future. At the same time, we could also hear it's this global dimension. So I'm asking you very much, mentioned the European perspective, of course, the European values and so on. Is there a danger? And we've said this morning because the focus of this conference is Africa meets Europe and not the other way around, to become too Eurocentric. The strategies for universities also says, to fulfill the European political agenda and so on. And I've asked this question before, I will raise this question again. I'm worried that this might happen, although I see we have to strengthen our identity and so on. So I guess that's part of the complexities, the contrariness we are facing currently, but where are we? What would you say?
Okay, thank you. And the microphone to Ludwig, please. And then if you could just phrase this as a question, Ludwig.
Yeah, I will go quickly because we are really running out of time, but okay. I will speak with keywords so that hopefully will be still clear but quick. Well, I'm speaking here on behalf of the EC2 Alliance. We have prepared our internationalization plan, which has been delivered. Well, typically it's based on looking at how we have developed joint international credit mobility, for instance, but we also have a future associated partner, which is the Ivan Franko University of Lviv in Ukraine. So we are clearly sharing here the same objectives, the same values. That's of no problem. We are facing challenges regarding the internationalization. Before that, let me just link quickly with what Danny was showing from the Coimbra Group study in 2019 on the components of internationalization. Clearly, we see that alliances have made already great success and progress regarding social integration, academic integration, communication skills, language skills. That I think there is still progress, but that's very obvious. Probably the main challenge remaining is actually the global opportunity in the context of the alliances. And I see there two potential main challenges which really need to be addressed, and probably also at the level of the Commission, which is, can you help us gaining more into the extra EU visibility? It's starting, but it's not enough. And second one, the eligibility of the non-EU partners. I've always, like Beatrix said this many times, but we would like all to have more flexibility for the eligibility of non-EU partners.
Okay, thank you. And the last question.
Yeah, thanks, Doris Fisher, University of Würzburg. We are part of CHARM-EU, but this is not a specific CHARM-EU comment or question. I'm going back to the very first remark that you made, that the first motivation of the European Union was the rankings. We had a discussion about rankings already, but I was wondering how that motivation translates into the European University Initiative, because so far the alliances are not ranked. And I'm not conceived that we are. I don't see that we are going to be. So is the idea that through the EUI, the individual universities will eventually be better in the international rankings, or is the rankings just a very vague background idea? Because I found that a bit strange, what the real purpose then of the initiative would be if it's all about rankings. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for those questions, some different questions. So I think if we could start with you, Vanessa, and we are fairly short of time, so we'll have fairly brief answers, and so just you not a chance to answer all of those questions, but just if you want to just select. Yes, of course. Thanks a lot. Let me start with the last question. I want to make sure that I was not misunderstood. The objective of the alliances is not the rankings, and I mentioned the flows of the rankings. We are not obsessed at all by the rankings, but when you speak with global partners, it comes up a lot in the discussion all the time. So I use that to speak the language of the global partners. Because, you know, when we try to explain the advantage of cooperating with partners of these alliances and explaining how they are more attractive, more competitive, we try to speak their language. So that's why I use this language, but it's not an objective in itself. As you know, at European level, we have developed the EU multi-rank to show that there are multiple dimensions when speaking about international cooperation. And we are going to continue in that direction in developing a European Higher Education Observatory. It has the name European, but it's not, European is not a bad word, you know. I mean, we need to be proud to be European. Yeah? And becoming stronger European, together we can become stronger global partners. And I think there is no opposition in that.
Actually, in the European Strategy for Universities, we have a chapter on the global cooperation, where we say very clearly that becoming stronger together within Europe, we can become stronger on a worldwide scene with the Team Europe approach. So I also answer partly to your question. So basically, yes, I was mentioning that we are developing a European Higher Education Observatory to observe the progress of higher education institutions in Europe, but also in comparison with the other one in the world, on the different priorities that we have presented in the European strategy for universities. When it comes to developing these common academic values, developing diversity and equity, developing both inclusion but also excellence, excellence in delivering the skills and the competencies that our society needs, when it comes to developing green and digital skills, etc., etc. So there are a lot of data collection at different levels, at the level of your institutions, at national level and European level, including with other international organizations. So our objective is to bring all this data together, also with the objective to reducing the overlaps in the data collection that you are asked to do, and to have a kind of a one-stop shop. So this is under development yes. So just to show you that we are not obsessed by the rankings at all. To answer maybe the question from Ludovic. So with the new Erasmus Plus program, we have reinforced the opportunities for mobility beyond Europe. So the budget that you get from the intra-EU budget to organize the classical mobility can be used as well, up to a certain percent, to send your student in any kind of country in the world, including including the US and Asia, etc., or Australia. We know that there is a lot of interest there, and not necessarily the budget in KIE 107 to do that. So it's complementary to the other instrument based on the external instruments where we have priorities for some regions in the world. So it is well used. Well, it depends of the countries. When you say that it is underused, there is a very different situation from country to country. In some countries like yours in France, we know that because the demand is so high that universities feel that they don't get enough budget. The situation is different in other countries, where actually the demand may not be as high as in some other countries, so they can use part of the budget for this international mobility. But we are going to have the midterm review of this new Erasmus Plus program already. We are going to launch a public consultation before the summer. So that is an opportunity to hear your views. I heard as well from you, Dorothy, the need to organize European consortia. And of course, we see the European Universities Alliances as catalysts for change. Yeah? We see that for developing this deeper cooperation, we need more instruments, as you said, but also more policy development. And we are all really engaged in a dialogue with all of you. I know that you are also engaged in dialogues with your own ministries, because reforms are needed not only at European level, but also most of the time at national level. So it's really a collective work at all levels that we are in, and it's very good. I mean that you share with us these new needs that has been expressed by the alliances. We are very happy to listen to it and to see what we can do. So the midterm review is really an excellent opportunity for that. And
so I think we may have to stop there, because I'm afraid just as just in terms of finishing the programme. So apologies, Vanessa, but I think there will be an opportunity to have a chat afterwards, and I encourage everybody to engage with our speakers and Vanessa, of course. This is a great pleasure to have you and to take your questions and to listen to our members' comments. So if you can join me all in thanking the panel very much for an incredibly stimulating session on alliances. Thank you very much.